Hello, we're rolling into another episode of the DRH show. As usual, I talk to interesting people within psychology, mental health, and well-being. Today, I'm joined by the founder of Integrated Change System. He's an expert at breaking through negative patterns of fears, phobias, and anxiety. Christopher Paul Jones, thanks for joining me.
Hi there, how you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for joining me here. It's great to have you here, Chris. Let's start off with you telling us your background, your trajectory in life, and how you ended up doing what you're doing.
Okay, well that's quite a few questions in one. So, as you said, my name's Christopher Paul Jones, or Chris to my friends, and I specialize in fears, phobias, and anxieties.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I mean, I really got into this because I had a lot of fears myself. Really, I had fear of flying, fear of public speaking. I had fear of insects and various other things as well, as well as being highly strung a lot of the time. So it was really through my experience, and I mean, one of the main ones was actually having a really negative experience when flying. I used to be long ago, like 15 years ago, I used to be a cameraman. I used to do video stuff, and I would been on a helicopter and filming, and this helicopter basically crashed half an hour after I got off it. Now, long story short, when I saw the scorch mark in the snow, that created a full-blown fear of flying. And it's kind of then that I realized that, that I needed to work on these things. So I learned all these things for change. So rather than the old style of, Freudian sitting on your couch for 20 years and maybe feeling a little bit better, it was, how do you change a pattern? How do you go from fear to relaxation or calmness really, really quickly? And that was basically the majority of my studies. So I studied hypnotherapy, NLP, EMDR, EFT, a whole load of others, as well as the more mainstream ones, cognitive behavioral therapy and things like that, contemporary psychotherapy. So I did a whole range of those. And from that, I kind of created a system that could work very powerfully for pretty much most people and could help them make changes very quickly, sometimes in as little as 7 minutes. So that's how I got to where I was. And, since that time, I've been on various, I've helped lots of people all the way through from, everyday people to Hollywood actresses and actors to musicians. And I've been in various press and magazines as well.
Brilliant. And of course, I could imagine a lot of media outlets inviting you because your role has become even more relevant, obviously, because of the pandemic. So as an expert in anxiety, have you found that anxiety levels have increased, or shall we say decreased, since the lockdown has been implemented?
I mean, yes, definitely in most cases increased. So for people that had, say, some fears of going out the house anyway, because very often when people are anxious, they don't feel safe, they don't feel comfortable. So subconsciously, they feel that being out your comfort zone creates this fear of stress. And so just like in the old-fashioned days when we would see a saber-toothed tiger, we'd go into what's called fight, flight, or freeze, more commonly known as fight or flight. So we'd run away, we'd play dead, or we'd hide. Now with anxiety, it's that against being out your comfort zone or being out of control or feeling unsafe. And so obviously now meeting people can be unsafe, getting too close to people can be unsafe, leaving your house can be unsafe. So there's so many more things to worry about. People that were maybe a little bit phobic of germs, it's now cranked up to the max because they actually have a reason for they can justify their fears. There are some cases where it's gone down. So social phobias, because very often with social phobia, it's that expectation that you're supposed to go somewhere and join in, but you're not, and you don't want to. And now that expectation has been taken away, and for a long while you're a good citizen if you stay at home and don't socialize. So some of my clients actually felt better as a result of lockdown, and also time to reflect and work out what's important as well. But yes, for the majority of people, the stress level, the anxiety is about money as well, and all the other things, career safety. There's so many other factors that are contributing to that now.
So what tips can you provide to those people who are still experiencing anxiety at the moment, although the lockdown has already been eased, with the exception, of course, of Leicester?
Yes.
Yeah, what
Well,
tips would you?
well, I mean, that is the big problem now. So the people who were like, okay, the outside world is scary, but I get to stay at home. Now
Mhm,
they're expected to go back to work, school, education. So actually, that anxiety level is turning up for some people.
mhm,
I mean, I guess the thing for what I always say to clients is your fear is not it's not a cold you catch. Like,
mhm,
it's subconscious, you don't consciously do it, so it feels like it's something that's just going to creep up on you. But in order to feel the way you're doing, you have to be doing something with what you're thinking in your head, with
mhm,
what you're saying to yourself, with what you feel, with what you picture in your mind, with how you breathe, with how you carry yourself. And so you change any one of those recipes, that components, and you change how you feel. So the first thing is just to get clear on what it is you're actually afraid of. What is causing my anxiety? What am I thinking about when I'm anxious? And what am I thinking about when I'm calmer, or less anxious, at least when I'm less stressed? What am I picturing in my mind that causes me to go, oh, la, 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 everything's fine, to then start worrying? So first, it's about breaking down your internal pattern.
mhm,
And then once you kind of get clear on what it is, and again, it won't necessarily be logical, and this is the other thing, you know, us as human beings, we spend our whole life trying to make sense of the world, but emotions and logic don't go hand in hand. It's like sometimes trying to talk French to someone from Germany. They're two
mhm,
different ways of the brain making decisions. Um, so letting go of the fact it will probably won't make sense, it's just working out, what am I doing? And then there's various techniques, various ways you can process that. I mean, one of the simplest for anxiety is breathing.
mhm,
If you're stressed, you're breathing normally very quickly. So just by slowing down your breathing and breathing slowly in for 5 seconds and holding for 5 seconds and out for 5 seconds, that's a very quick way to
mhm,
change how you feel. Various things with your body, like if you're holding your body like this, you're going to feel a certain way. If you just shift your posture, you tend to feel very differently. So
mhm,
those are two very simple techniques, but then it's about getting into the beliefs. So another very powerful question is, what am I believing to feel this way? And that's one I often ask myself and ask my clients. It's like, what am I believing in order to feel worried or fearful or stressed? I'm believing, and again, something along the lines, I'm believing I'm not safe, I'm not protected. And then you can dig on that and go, well, where's that coming from? What's that about? Um, so yeah, those are a couple of starters. There are quite a few other things. I mean, changing the voice in your head is another very powerful one.
mhm,
So often when we're worried, beating ourselves up, we have this big booming voice going, oh, it's not safe, or it's going to go wrong. And if you just change that, if you imagine that it was Mickey Mouse saying it, it would take all the impact out of it, you know. So very quick things you can do with the internal representations to change how you feel.
mhm.
Oh, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. Yeah,
Yeah.
those are brilliant tips for managing anxiety. But
Mm.
what I'm also interested to hear from you, Chris, is that it has already been 100 days since the lockdown has been
Yes.
imposed. So we were kind of forced into being isolated. So what I'm interested to find out is, aside from anxieties, there's kind of like, you know, we're kind of used to being isolated in a way. So what advice would you give to people who's trying to, you know, crawl again from the isolation and be, you know, join again the larger society?
Yes. Okay. Well, I mean, I think it's baby steps. I mean, I think,
Mhm,
as you said, it's crawling. So things like social anxiety, if you're already a bit nervous about talking to people, then
mhm,
because you haven't spoke to people in whatever it was 100 days, then it's gonna, you've almost, it's like, oh, I've forgotten how to talk to humans, you know. It's
mhm,
like you've spent so long in your own company, in your own voice. So the key is take it small, take it, and know that everyone else is in the same boat. So I mean, this is a big thing with social anxiety generally, is you're often inwards thinking about how you feel and thinking
mhm,
about, oh, everyone's looking at me, and am I doing this right, and whatever. And of course, everybody else is thinking the exact same thing. They're not actually paying that much attention to you. So the first thing is to take it small, and then it's about just, you know, what is the first steps? What would I enjoy doing? What can I do? And just taking it gradually and expanding that way. That would be my best advice for that to start with.
Mhm. And I think you've also heard of the word coronaphobia, because it's been quite popularized in social media and websites. And
Mm.
I came across of that word through Anxiety UK. And the way they explain it is, of course, you can judge from the word, is that you're conscious, or you're anxious about, you know, catching coronavirus. So you wash your hands more frequently than usual, and then you wear
Yes.
masks. Of course, we're told that we have to do that. So, but there's kind of like an irrational fear that you would catch the virus. So what would be your advice to those people? Like, you know, on top of the anxiety that they already have social anxiety, and they already have anxiety of, you know, job loss and employment and all of that. And now there's also coronaphobia.
Yes, I mean it comes under the category, I'd say, of sort of OCD or germ phobia, which is, as you say, some people who are maybe cleaned a little more than they had to, or used a little more disinfectant than they used to. It's now, you know, in overwhelm, and because they have a reason. Before, the people go, "No, you're just being irrational." There's not. Now they're like, "Oh, there's germs outside." So this belief is getting reinforced. But as you say, like most phobias, they're not just washing their hands when they come in, or they're doing it every 10 seconds. It becomes a compulsion. And so, like any phobia, it's about finding where does that come from. Now, while it's been exacerbated by the current situation, there will be events in your past that made you start thinking that way. There'll be seeds that made you overreact to germs in the past. Quite often, if you got sick as a child, that's a common one to create this, what we call a Pavlovian response. Do you want me to go into that? Do you want me to explain what that
Sure,
is?
please, for the benefit of
Yeah. So Pavlov and his dog. So Ivan Pavlov, for the early days of research psychology, he'd take a bell or tuning fork, depending on which study you read, and he'd feed these dogs. Ring the bell, feed the dogs, ring the bell, feed the dogs. Eventually, you ring the bell, dogs salivate like they're about to be fed. Now, the bell has nothing to do with food, but it's called conditioning, it's association. So there's a dog down the road, and then every time, and my dog walked past when I first moved here, my dog walked past and that dog was there and barked at her. And now every time she walks past that, even though I haven't seen that dog since, she acts like she's ready to go into battle because she's been conditioned. Now, human beings do that all the time. So Kiss the Love of Your Life, there's a tune playing on the radio, you're back there. Love of Your Life breaks up with you, you hear that tune, you can hear it 2, 10, 20 years later. If the feelings are strong enough, you feel it. Now, there was a study done on phobias with what's called Little Albert, where they'd bang a gong, show him these animals and bang a gong. And eventually he would install a phobia, because all he would do is go, see, jump, which is why you can create phobias of really odd things. If you're in a heightened enough state and see an orange or a piece of fruit or something, certainly when you're young, before you have that cognitive understanding, it creates a conditioned response. Now, most fears, most phobias, most anxiety are created in the past where an event has happened where you become scared. So sticking with
just
the
like
dog,
you experienced earlier, you told me about the plane.
yes, exactly. Well, exactly that. So you're fine. Then you have a near miss. I mean, how near it was, but in my mind, it was a near miss. And then you suddenly go, flying could equal death. And then suddenly you've created a Pavlovian response. Now, it doesn't have to be that extreme. Sometimes it could be someone was just in a really heightened state, just, you know, busy from work, stressed out, and they're sitting on a plane, feeling stressed out, seeing the plane, feeling stressed out, and the two become linked. So, so it can start with a small seed and then spread over time. So if your parents were very house proud, that can do it. Like I say, if you got sick as a child, that can do it. So there'll be normally things in your past that have triggered you to feel that way. And it's about exploring those. And there's various ways you can take the impact out of those Pavlovian responses, basically neutralizing it. So yeah, that's basically what's happening. And it's just obviously in the current climate, everything's turned up. So if it was mild before, it can be extreme because you're already in overwhelm. And when you're in overwhelm, just like people are more snappy when they're at their limits, it's the same for lockdown and that kind of thing.
Now, Chris, you really provide a good outline on how anxiety can really affect us and how we learned it. But what I'm interested to hear from you is there also a way that anxiety could also be helpful to us?
Yeah, well, fear certainly is a useful response. And again, I was talking about earlier about the analogy that's often used about a caveman being faced by a saber-toothed tiger. When you are in physical danger, your brain needs to be able to respond and run away, play dead, or fight back instantly. So in answer, yes. If you're in real danger, your body needs to know, should I walk down this dark, scary alley at midnight? No. Some fear, some trepidation is useful. It's how it's used. But when it's overclocked, when it's so overclocked that you just go into freeze, then actually, even if you were in physical danger, you actually have no ability to respond anyway. So it's about having enough to go, oh, that's interesting. What is that about? Let me check in with myself. Is that irrational? Is there something I need to look at? And then working from there. But, making a plan doesn't require an emotional component. So you can be organized and go, okay, I won't walk down that dark alley and do that, but it doesn't require this heightened level of fear. But yeah, to answer your question, a little bit can be helpful, and it's how you use it, it's how you utilize it.
And let's go back to the effect of the pandemic, because you also work, trying to improve people's mental health. So do you think the experience of the lockdown would have a lasting impact on mental health?
Yes, I think there's two sides to this. Definitely, even for people, doing what we do, it was a sudden shock, just to making all these different plans, and then suddenly, like a lot of my work is with fear of flying, and then, suddenly every flight is grounded. I never in a million years could I anticipate that. Suddenly going to the pub to see your friends was impossible. Things that you took for granted. So this idea that your routine can be so quickly changed, I think, will stay with people a lot. And one of the things about anxiety is a need to be safe or protected or be in control. So when that's ripped from under you, I think that expectation that it can happen again is definitely going to have a lasting impact. And, the idea of being locked away, some people are okay in their own company, some people can't stand it. And so for those people, that's going to have a lasting effect. I think there is a positive, though, in that people have, like houses with gardens have suddenly shot through the roof in sales, even though everything else has dropped. People are buying up allotments. People are walking more. I think things that we took for granted, like just being outside in nature, has suddenly become a massive priority. I think some people slowing down from work and going, well, what is essential? What is it I've been doing that I didn't need to? And so, like everything, I think there's good and bad. Obviously, the lasting financial effects are going to be big as well. That's not going to be something that's going to change very quickly. So people losing their jobs or concerned about the future. So yeah, there are lots of lasting effects, but again, there is some good, and it's what you focus on is going to determine how you feel. So if you're focusing on the positive, it's normally going to help you able to find solutions. If you're stuck in the fear, as I say, being frozen isn't very helpful. So.
You mentioned how we become more kind of appreciative of what we used to take for granted, because I'm a freelancer just like you. I most of the time work from home, and so I don't really commute. But before, when I want to eat out, when I just want to go to London, I can do that anytime. But now it has been totally changed. So what I'd like to hear from you, Chris, is how can we adapt to this? They've introduced this new term. I'm not really a big fan of this. They called it new normal. So how can we adapt to that new normal? What tips do you have on that?
The adapting to the new normal. I mean, do you mean from an emotional point of view? You mean?
I suppose they say that most likely that we're just going to be, limit working from, in the traditional sense that we used to go to an actual workplace, but they just realize that more of it can be actually done, home based. So
well, I mean, and I think certainly, so for me, I'm doing a lot more of my work over video and things like that. So again, good and bad, technology's boosted forwards. People who have the space to work from home are enjoying not commuting, certainly if they work in London. Though, not so much if they live in a small house and the kids are doing school and things like that. I think this really is, again, it comes back to the fact that the person who can adapt to change the quickest tends to be
Mhm.
person most flexibility tends to win. And I think in life, you know, this is, they've said this in business for years, you know, the person who can adapt to the new changes is the one that's going to grow the most, is going to make the most money.
Mhm.
And while it's not exactly the same, I think it's true for the mental health, you know, that things aren't supposed to be how they always were, you know, just like, you know, I make fun of my dad for always doing the like Monty Python type, well, back when I was young, we never had any of these smartphones, blah, blah, blah. You know, so adaptation is normal. We've done it. It's just that certain things speed us forward. So in terms of like, you know, when we've had wars, for example, that's sped up computer technology. And I think so this working from home and all those things, it's just to say that when
Mhm.
we do have times of crisis, things speed up, and that can be good and bad. Things change, and there's good and bad in that. So just reminding yourself that there's good and bad in that. And I think that's the main thing, that it's not necessarily going to be how it was, and not all of that is a bad thing. And I think it was like a Facebook meme going around quite a lot, which was, you know, before you want things how they were, think about, you know, what it is you actually want. I'm messing that paraphrase up. But basically there are some things from the past you probably want to let go of. So it's like, do you want everything how it was? What is it you want to take from that you would like to have now? And what is it you'd like to change?
Mhm. I think that's also where the concept of psychological resilience comes in. You said,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, where people can adapt, they will tend to flourish, they will tend to thrive. And actually, I've been talking to two experts on psychological resilience, and they
Oh
say,
yeah.
yeah, resilience is really, you know, will going to be tested during the pandemic, during the lockdown. And I think
Absolutely.
just like what you said, it's our ability to adapt, it's our ability to be flexible,
Yeah.
whether, you know, in terms of skills or whether in relation to mental health, that will really, you know, make us survive this lockdown.
Yes.
Now, I want to move on from to another topic. I was kind of trolling you. I was looking at your website, and
Oh yeah.
I found out that you wrote an article about having too much or too little therapy, and
Okay.
I was
Yes.
kind of
Yes.
intrigued on that. So,
Okay.
can we really have too much or too little therapy?
Oh, definitely. I mean, which are you asking me about? Because I can answer
Let's
both.
go to too much first, because
Too much
I
therapy.
think.
It depends, right? So it depends what you mean by too much therapy. Well,
Mhm,
I mean, I could go very deep into this. It depends on the type of therapy as well,
mhm,
because there's lots of therapies that aren't appropriate. So, for example, traditional talk therapy
mhm,
doesn't resolve trauma. In fact, there's some evidence that it cements it because you're constantly reliving it without changing it, and it's locking it in place. But I think more generally, what I was talking about there is the fact that if you're spending your whole time introspective, working on yourself, that actually there comes a time, it's like waiting to be perfect. It's like you're the only way, let's go to social anxiety, which we're talking about. The only way you're ever really going to get good at or better at being sociable is to be sociable.
mhm,
So you have to work on the thoughts, the feelings, work on the triggers, but there comes a point where you have to get out there. And it's a bit like, you know, again, people who wait to be perfect, they never do anything. They'll write their novel and it won't be right, so they'll shelve it and then they'll start a new one. And so waiting to be perfect is not a good idea. So that's what I'm talking about by too much therapy, too much introspection, waiting to be perfect, or having an if-when goal. When I've fixed this, then I will live my life. And it's like I'm going to work on myself and live my life.
mhm,
I'm going to get out there, because if you wait to be perfect, you'll never get anything done.
mhm,
Too little is the obvious one, especially for us Brits, which is, and again, I'm saying therapy, I mean self-work, is this idea of just, well, you just have to power through. Just, you know, you just ignore it, power through, pretend it's not there. Now, that's a typical old-fashioned reaction. The problem is, again, there are lots of things that if you're just constantly pushing them down and pushing them away, that they come back twice as bad. And you know, one of the patterns with anxiety is exactly that. It's like, I don't want to feel bad, I don't want to feel, so I'm going to pretend it's not there, push it, and then eventually it comes back and it becomes overwhelming. So it's like the more you try and control something you can't control logically, the more out of control you feel, and then you get stuck in a loop. So those are my thoughts. But yeah, I did come across people that are seemingly waiting to live their life, and that's not a good thing.
mhm. Chris, I'm sure you've been asked this a lot of time.
Mm.
How do we stop from worrying? Can we actually just do it on our own, or what's the benefit of talking to an expert such as yourself? What can you actually offer that we can do on our own if we try to manage our worrying?
Well, I think it was a quote from Gregory Bateson, which was one
Mm-hmm.
can't be long his own psychotherapist, which
Mm-hmm.
basically means there are lots of things we can't do ourselves. That's not to say we shouldn't try,
Mm-hmm.
but we are always limited by the fact that our own mind gets in the way, our own blocks stop us, you know. And so even when people are at a high level, it's always good to get a second opinion. Yeah, there are things you can do on yourself to stop worrying. I mean, one of the things, as I said, going back to how we started, is focus on what that's about. You know,
Mm-hmm.
most often with worry, it's a belief that by somehow preparing for every worst case scenario, you'll somehow be ready for danger.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's not like that, because it's like exercising a muscle. So the more you practice worry, anger, stress, the better you become at it. And so it's learning to go, whether something good or bad happens makes no difference to how much time I dwelled on it. That's not going to make any difference, you know. And so it's challenging that. The other thing, and this is a common example, is to schedule it. Is to go, right, well, if I'm worrying all the day, let me schedule it for 15 minutes a day. I'm going to think of everything I have to worry about, and then I can park it. There's a level to that where someone suggested to me, oh, why don't you go stand by the dustbins and do it? Then there you'll speed up the process. You'll go, right, because it's unpleasant to do. And so, yeah, it's getting into the habit of, you know, I'm not a big fan of happy thoughts, you know, positive thinking and pushing away the negative, because you have to, because that negative is teaching you something as well. But it is about whatever you put in your mind is how you feel. So if you're focusing on everything that can possibly go wrong, you start getting the feelings as if it just happened, because what you imagine affects how you feel. Now, in terms of working with someone like myself, the work I do, like I say, is turning off that wrongly held belief, or helping someone change that wrongly held belief that worrying is protecting or serving them, and then taking out those patterns both in the moment and in the past. And very common with worry and anxiety, it's a fear of the future. It's what I call what ifs and yeah buts. So the person is constantly going, well, what if this happens? But yeah, I might be okay now, but what if I'm bad tomorrow? And it's this, again, subconsciously, no one's doing it deliberately. It's this idea that I can't be happy now because I might not be happy tomorrow. So I have to preemptively worry for the future. And yeah, again, not necessarily logical, but there's all sorts of reasons why people are doing that.
And is there a particular type of anxiety that you specialize, or you kind of like all around kind of anxiety expert?
Yeah, I tend to work, I mean, as I say, I work a lot with specific phobias and then, yeah, general anxiety and social anxiety. I mean, there's a lot of crossover between the two anyway. So yeah, I tend to work with all kinds. The major difference between an anxiety and a specific phobia, although like I say, you can have both together, is that a phobia is love dogs, get bitten by a dog, one day change. Anxiety tends to be more systemic. Now, what that means in English is prolonged feeling of being unsafe or unprotected. So being bullied at school, moving around a lot, having distant parents, having anxious parents, you know, all those things. So it's more of a long period of being in this kind of heightened awareness state. But in terms of changing them, they're actually very similar patterns.
Well, what about people, because you mentioned this earlier, what about people who have fear of public speaking? Can you also help them?
Yes. Well, yeah, well, public speaking was a big one for me. And again, it comes back to the patterns. And so for me, the fear of public speaking, it wasn't as bad as the flying, but it felt as bad. And, you know, there's a whole study where they interviewed people and said, you know, what's your biggest fear? And I think speaking was number one and dying was number two. So if you take that literally, it means people are more scared of speaking than dying. I suspect it was how the question was worded, but it's very high. Now, for me, I was about 10 years old, and I wasn't a great reader. I was labeled with dyslexia, so it means I'm better now, but it means I mix up words and spell things backwards and stuff. So when I've given something to read I haven't seen before, it's not good. And, you know, as a shy teenager, so I get up, read this book, stutter, mess it up completely. And then of course, you know, kids being kids, they're not the most supportive. So they laughed. And in my mind, I went, I'm never going to do this again. You know, this equals embarrassment, rejection, humiliation, whatever. And so that was something I carried with me for quite a long time. And it was only really when I changed those emotions and those beliefs I changed how they feel. But one of the very quick things, one of the biggest shifts, apart from the internal work that I did, was one of my mentors. He turned to me and was like, he was doing what's called, do you know provocative therapy? Do you know what this is?
No.
So provocative therapy was developed by Frank Farrelly. So some of the big people in neurolinguistic programming use it a lot. And what it is where you basically, when someone goes, oh yeah, I've got a problem with my weight, instead of going, yeah, okay, well, let's work on that. You go, yeah, you're fat. Because what happens is, and it can be done with humor as well. It doesn't have to be rude, but what it does, it shocks the person. So they're suddenly like, they have to just, well, no, I'm not. No, I'm a confident person. I'm a good. Oh, good. Well, now you've told me all those reasons. It's kind of reverse psychology, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, my mentor goes to me, goes, "You're selfish," and I go, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah, you're selfish. You won't get up and speak. You're selfish." And I was like, "Well, that's not my fault. I'm scared." And he goes, "Yeah, but you're thinking of yourself. When you get up there, you're thinking about what people are thinking, what people are going to say about you, that you think they're going to look at you." He said, the second you get up there and start thinking about what you can give your audience, the difference you can make, and how you can help them, it's very hard to feel as worried or anxious. And that one always stuck with me, and that made a massive shift as well. So again, it's always comes back to, what am I thinking, believing, and feeling to feel this way? And then where does that come from? I.e., what's in the past to trigger that? And what do I change? When do I not do this? So if I'm scared, and another example, if I'm scared of spiders but not of woodlice, what's the difference in my mind between the two? And then you get very clear on what you're doing. So yeah, one of the quick tips for speaking is, what am I thinking about? What am I focusing on to feel that way? And if you want to change it, if you want to frame it to the positive, what is the gift? Well, for what reason am I getting up there and speaking, and how can I make a difference to my audience?
I've also heard that, like it helps, like if you make a small chat with your audience, so you kind of build rapport with them, so you kind of become more comfortable with your audience, and it's just like talking in front of your
Yes,
friends
well,
and family.
yes, yeah. So again, like changing out anything, there's the internal things, there's the thoughts and feelings, and then there's the external. So obviously rehearsing, so if you're going to do a planned reading, then obviously getting to know, I mean, it doesn't have to be word for word, but getting clear in your head is obviously going to make it better. And as you say, yes, the more you get to know your audience, the easier it can be for the most part. So the more you kind of realize that they're not your enemy, that most people, I mean, there are a few in life, most people don't come to see someone speak just to catch them out. They come because they want to learn something or listen or hear what you have to say. And so it's reframing those thoughts. But yeah, you're absolutely right that the more you can get to know who you're talking to, and also the more you can tailor. So for example, before we spoke, we hadn't met before, but I didn't actually know that. You'd looked at my website, you'd looked at some stuff. So you would try to get to know me before we did this call, and that makes a difference,
Now, I just want to pick up on what you mentioned earlier. You said that there's a proponent of provocative therapy, and it kind of had an influence on how you approach people. So I just want to know, is that a particular individual or a particular piece of literature was the greatest influence in your work?
Sorry, ask me that again. I didn't.
Sorry,
quite
is that a particular individual, or is that a particular book which has the greatest influence in your work?
I mean, where I am now, there's been so many, it's hard to tell. So like I say, so many different schools and so many people within those. I mean, there's so many TED Talks and self-help things now. It'd be hard to put one. I think what got me on the path, other than the need to change, it's quite a common one, I'm sure, was I got some audios by a man named Tony Robbins. Now, he's a very famous American motivational speaker now. Again, some of us Brits might be a little bit, he's a bit full on, he's a bit high energy, but actually, what he did do, what he has a skill to do is say a lot of very complicated things, psychological terms, in a very simple way, in a very practical way. And so seeing him, that made me think, maybe I could go and help people. So that was one of the things. But over that journey, there's been so many mentors and so many books, I couldn't put one. I think if I'm talking to other therapists, one of the advice I would be is you know, you're talking about provocative therapy. That will work with someone who's had a lot of sympathy, who's dwelt a lot on themselves and had a lot of reassurance. It won't necessarily work for someone who's spent a lot of time beating themselves up. So it's not just knowing the different methods, it's knowing how to apply to different people. What is it? What's the gap in that client and what do they need? So having the flexibility in your approach to be able to tailor it to each individual, I would say. So that's why, you know, read as much as you can, learn from as many sources as you can. And there's definitely some things that I thought, oh yeah, that's really made a difference to my work. And there's some like, oh, there's a few distinctions there, but everything helps.
And do you offer lectures for people who are interested to follow your path?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's all been online at the moment, but I do talks from time to time, mostly on sort of phobias and things like that. I haven't got any booked at this stage, but if you go to christopherpauljones.com, there is an events page there, and it will tell you, for anyone interested, what's going on there. And
you've clearly invested a lot of time and effort, you know, being an expert in anxiety and helping people manage their fears. So what's the most important thing you want the public to know about your work?
Oh, big question. The most important thing I would like people to know about my work. Well, it's not really about my work. I would say the most important thing I would like people to know about them is that everything they are doing, however illogical, however irrational, is meeting a need. And again, you know, I've already talked about this earlier in the interview, not logically, but subconsciously, it's meeting a need. So if you're anxious, most likely your mind is trying to keep you in control or protected, fearful the same. So it's what we call secondary gain. So there'll always be a benefit to what we're doing. And there'll always be, like I said before, there'll always be a bunch of things we're doing with our feelings, thoughts, and emotions to feel bad. And what I would say to people is it's a lot easier to change than you think. Just because you've had something for 10, 20 years doesn't mean you can't change it. So going back to the analogy of the dog, you can love dogs, one day get bitten by a dog. You can go from love to fear in a second. It's just turning on that fear response. And if it's that easy to go from fear, from love to fear or calmness to fear, you can go from fear to calmness. It's just finding those triggers and changing them. So that would be the big advice, that change is often easier than you think, no matter how long you've had these issues or thought processes.
And of course, over the years, you've been working on helping people manage their anxiety. You've come across with some misconceptions. So I suppose, can you just take this as an opportunity to address those misconceptions that you've come across?
Okay, in what way?
Like any misconceptions about anxiety, misconceptions about fear?
Okay, well, I mean, the big one with anxiety is that it's weakness. And so, you know, again, a lot of the testimonials on my website, for example, are from women. And someone asked me, you know, why is that? And I said, well, I think firstly, and it's a stereotype, but it's still true today, that a lot more women tend to ask for help. And of the men who do, they're unwilling to often admit that they ask for help. And so this idea, and it's not just men, this is everyone, this idea that if I'm anxious, I'm weak, that's the big one. When most people are anxious because they're overwhelmed, they're trying to do more and more and more and more, push their feelings away, pretend they're not there. So it's not about how strong you are. And, you know, I've worked with people from, you know, special forces and all sorts of what you would call tough people, you know, physically, but that doesn't mean they don't have anxiety. That doesn't mean they have fear. In fact, they're dealing with so much tension and pressure and not show any emotion that actually it's probably affecting them more. So the first thing is it's not weakness. The second thing is it's not your fault. And while I'm saying, you know, there's a pattern to it, it's not, you don't catch it, it comes from somewhere. You didn't sit there and go, you know, what would be best is if I created fear or anxiety. And so there's a reason for it. And it's just about going, all right, look, and the more you can be open about that, the easier it is to let it go. And so a lot of people suffer from what's called a fear of the fear, which from cognitive behavioral therapy is this idea that it's no longer about flying or speaking or anything else, or corona, going out in public, it's actually a fear of your reaction. It's like, well, what if I get anxious? What if I embarrass myself? What if everyone looks at me? And so then you've created a phobia about being phobic or being anxious at that point. And so it's working on that and going, actually, the more at peace you can be with how you feel, the easier it is to choose. So the big mistake I think people make, is in life, they're going, okay, push forward. If they're achievers, if they're type A personalities, trying to get more and more done, trying to achieve more, get that promotion, whatever. And then they're trying to tackle their anxiety with that same, right, time to get rid of it, time to let it go. And it's just like, well, yeah, it's like, it's like going to a yoga class and go, right, I'm going to be the best at relaxing ever. I'm going to be the best at meditation. And the more at peace you can be with how you feel, the easier it is to let it go. The easier it is to choose the path you want. If you have, I must be different, I must change, it makes the process a lot slower. So those are two big misconceptions I find with people, that sometimes the high achievers, the people that just want it done, it makes it harder. And in fact, I remember very clearly someone called me up once and said, okay, and they were telling me their problem. And I was saying, okay, yeah, I mean, I won't know till I work with you, but maybe 1 or 2 sessions. And they went, oh, okay, well, I need it to take 1 session. And I said, great, well, it will take at least 3 then. And that was my provocative way of saying, the more intention you have about, I must change, the harder it is to change. And so, using the flying example, it's going, maybe I'll get anxious on the plane, maybe I won't. Life goes on. The irony is you're less likely to get anxious if you go, I mustn't get anxious. What if I get anxious? Oh my God, I'm going to get anxious. Well, now I'm anxious. See, I was right to be anxious. You've just created that. So those are some of the misconceptions. I think in terms of treatment as well, because while I do a lot of things, and as you said, the integrated change process, when people watch my videos and things, they often see, because they put it in the category of either talk therapy or counseling or hypnotherapy. And obviously I come under the category of hypnotherapy because it's people are sitting there and they're like, oh, I feel different. And one of the big things, the misconceptions there, is people think they'll be out of control. And obviously they've seen people on TV go 3 to 1, you're a chicken. So they think, oh, I'm going to be manipulated. And it's not that at all. And that's nothing like the work. All I'm doing is relaxing the analytical mind enough so it can talk to the emotional mind. So rather than having the illusion of control, so you're only controlling that 5%, you're actually controlling the full mind. The unconscious and the conscious can talk, so you can have real control rather than the illusion of control.
So you don't offer hypnosis?
Yes, I am a hypnotherapist. I'm a trained hypnotherapist as well as everything else, but I don't, it's more what you call interventionist. So people wouldn't, it's not what people think it is. So, and because I don't tend to make a big deal out of it, because people firstly misunderstand what it is. And then secondly, when people have anxiety, they have a need to be in control. So if they think they're going to be out of control, they get worried about that. But so I would put it in the category of something like meditation or yoga. You're completely conscious of where you are and who you are, but you're relaxing your mind enough to get in touch with your emotional mind. So that's how I would describe it. So,
brilliant.
But
I just want to pick up on one point that you kind of alluded to earlier. You said that most of your clients are female, and you said that it's because some men tend to not seek help as much as women. We've been talking about mental health for I think for the past few decades, certainly early 2000, and there's a lot of discussions about mental health. And I think one of the beneficiary of that discussion is the men. So do you think that this would change, that the mental health landscape would change within the next 5-10 years?
I mean, I think
in relation to men's mental health, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I think in fairness, it already has. I mean, there is a lot more, stuff about talking about your feelings that, again, it isn't weakness. And so I have seen a shift. I'd say, I do get men, but it's more even when they can't. So I do see more men than I used to, but it's more that they're still a little bit more, I don't really want everyone knowing about it though. So I think it already has. I think the biggest thing, going back to my earlier point, is that certainly the old-fashioned alpha male that if you talk about your problems, you're somehow weak, rather than if you talk about your problems, you're brave because you're willing to face them. And it's actually weakness to suppress and hide and pretend they're not there. weakness maybe being the wrong word, but it's certainly not, you know, it's better to deal with what you have to deal with and acknowledge where you're at. Yeah, I think that will change. I think that has been changing, and I think the work you were doing before on the radio station, all those things are growing now, and I think people are understanding more that, you know, the more you can work on yourself, the better you can, the more you can get where you want to be, you know. And I think, you know, mental health generally is much more talked about. You know, there's mental health is now part of the workplace. You know, you know, to talk about how you're feeling. These things were never done before. You know, the only illness that counted was if you'd hurt your knee. You know, so I see good things. Yeah, I do think it'll be interesting though with more work from home, how that's going to work, and that would be an interesting one to explore. How now people are going to be working from home more, and they won't have the same work community. Are there all these mental health schemes? How are they going to work? And that would be interesting to monitor over the next few years.
We've learned a lot about anxiety, about mental health, but let's just go something personal. I'll ask you something personal. So,
yeah,
Chris, how do you relax? What's your distressing outlet?
My main one is walking, actually. So taking the dog and going off to the parks and stuff like that. So again, actually, that was one thing that was taken away for a while, or at least limited. So yeah, going out to the countryside and taking a walk is my best. It's like there's something about it, the rhythmical movement that's kind of very meditative. So that's my best way to chill out. And I often take like an audio book or something with me as well, so I can take in the landscape and then listen. So those are my best ways to relax. Yeah. Other than that, yeah, it's not, I wouldn't say it's relaxing, but maybe therapeutic in a weird way. So recently, all my old university friends had PlayStations. So I finally got one as a sort of wedding gift from my friends. This is how my friends are, my old uni friends. So I shoot my friends periodically on the PlayStation. So that's been good, and to bond with friends actually has been good as well, because some of those people I hadn't spoke to in years, and now I'm speaking to them every week. So those are two of my ways to relax and chill out.
And where do you see yourself 10 years from now?
Oh, that's a big one. I don't know. I mean, hopefully
You're writing a book.
This. Oh, the book, yes. That's which one? The flying book is, yeah, the flying book is ready to launch. So that's out, hopefully. So yeah, I mean, just I guess being, you know, getting out there and doing what I'm doing to more people. I don't have any grand ambitions to rule the world just yet. So
TED Talk, maybe.
What's that? TED Talk. Yeah, that's one on the list I haven't done yet. Yeah, TED Talk. But in terms of everything else, I've actually achieved most of my goals so far. So maybe I need to extend them. But yeah, being out there, getting in front of more people. Yeah, as you say, a TED Talk. Yeah, getting more books. Teaching more people that actually change isn't as difficult as they've been led to believe.
And of course, anxiety is really, you know, it affects a lot of people's health. So what you're doing is really, you know, it can benefit a lot of people, you know, whether there's coronavirus or not. It just helps people in terms of their public speaking. Now, finally, Chris, what else is in the pipeline? And remind us again of your website.
Okay, so I'm just launching a home study kit on fear of public speaking. Ironically, I don't know if you knew that when you started talking about it, but that's coming out. So I've got a shop online that has what have we got at the moment? We've got fear of flying, fear of speaking will be out in a couple of days. Anxiety kits, various products out there that can help you. Also, they're on the App Store for some of them are for Android, and there's a few just coming out for iPad as well, iPhone and iPad. See, that's what I've been doing with some of the free time, actually finally developing all these things. And yeah, in terms of people finding out more about me, they can go to my website, christopherpauljones.com. And if they go to the Clarity Call page, they can book a 30-minute consultation for free, and we can talk about what they need. They can also, there's also on there various articles, various blog posts, and there's various sort of videos as well. So some of them are me doing interventions and, you know, me being on various TV programs, but a lot of them are tips. So little techniques are going into more detail of different processes you can do to change how you feel quite quickly. So they're worth checking out as well.
Okay. Well, it's been an insightful conversation with you, Chris, but unfortunately our time is up. Thank you for sharing your time and your expertise. I look forward to hearing more about your work.
You're very welcome. I look forward to speaking to you soon.